Simple news script. America's trading partners choose Canada for months after President Trump said he wanted to change how the world does business tonight. People in Canada are getting ready for money problems as America and the U.S. may have. A big fight about buying and selling things. The U.S. owes a huge amount of money, $37 trillion. Big business deals worth billions of dollars disappeared overnight. Machines that used to make things for the future now just sit there doing nothing in empty factories in the middle part of America. Across the oceans, companies in Japan, Germany, and Britain are quietly moving their orders away from cities like Detroit and Houston, and instead calling Toronto and Vancouver in Canada. What happens when countries that used to work with America stop calling America and start calling Canada instead? If this keeps happening, it's not just about buying and selling things. It's about power, jobs, and keeping our country safe. How much has things already changed under our feet? And how much more can things change before something really bad happens? Number 7, Brazil, the farming superpower, makes a choice. Picture the world's biggest farming country that feeds hundreds of millions of people around the world, quietly cutting off its technology connection to America. That's exactly what's happening in Brazil, and what this means is really shocking. For more than 100 years, Brazilian farming has needed American know-how, equipment, and new ideas. Huge soybean farms that go on forever, cattle ranches bigger than some U.S. states, coffee farms that supply markets around the world, all powered by American farming technology. That partnership that lasted over 100 years is falling apart in the past year and a half. Brazilian purchases of Canadian farming technology have exploded up by 71%, while contracts with American suppliers have dropped by 24%. We're talking about fancy farming systems, advanced watering networks, and computer-powered crop watching that forms the backbone of modern farming. What caused this huge shift? American farming technology companies focused on American markets and were limited by rules about selling things to other countries, so they couldn't make their solutions work for Brazilian mega farms. When Brazilian farming giants needed systems that could watch millions of acres at the same time, American suppliers offered bigger versions of equipment made for Iowa cornfields. Canadian companies approached the problem differently. They sent engineers to actually live on Brazilian farms. They studied the special problems of tropical farming. Massive farming operations and connected supply chains. The result was custom solutions that Brazilian farmers couldn't get anywhere else. But this goes way beyond just selling equipment. Brazilian farming giant companies are now paying for research and development buildings in Canadian provinces. They're moving decades of knowledge they built up about large farming to Canadian partners. Seeds, fertilizers, and processing technology that once flowed from America to Brazil are now being developed together in Canada. The money flows have completely flipped around. Major Brazilian companies are buying Canadian farming operations, building processing facilities, and creating connected supply chains that completely skip American suppliers. Brazilian engineers and farming experts are working permanently in Canadian facilities, sharing techniques that took generations to develop. A top executive at one of Brazil's largest farming companies, speaking privately, explained the shift. We needed partners who understood that modern farming requires working together for a long time, not just buying and selling things once. Canada became that partner. The damage to American farming interests has been terrible. Equipment makers across the Midwest are watching billion-dollar Brazilian contracts disappear. Seed companies are losing market share to Canadian-Brazilian joint companies. Farming research universities are seeing their global influence disappear. As innovation centers move northward, manufacturing towns in Nebraska and Kansas that specialized in farm equipment are making less. Research facilities in Texas and California are cutting farming programs as international partnerships fall apart. The effects are spreading through supply chains that once seemed unbreakable. But if you think losing the world's farming superpower is terrible, wait until you see what happened with America's closest ally in Asia, number 6, Japan, the silent energy revolution. Picture Japan's industrial heartland stopping completely because American energy suppliers can't deliver on time. That nightmare almost became real. It explains why America's most loyal Asian partner is quietly building a new future without American energy for 70 years. Japan relied on American energy know-how and supplies to power its industrial miracle. From rebuilding after the war to the technology revolution, American LNG terminals, coal shipments, and energy technology kept Japanese factories running around the clock. That 7-decade partnership is falling apart right before our eyes. The collapse started with reliability, or actually the lack of it. Japanese utility companies operate on very thin profits and exact scheduling. When American LNG terminals began having regulatory delays and political interference, Japanese power plants faced possible blackouts. Industrial operations worth billions hung in the balance. Canadian energy companies saw the opportunity and moved with surgical precision. New export terminals in British Columbia began offering Japanese utilities something American suppliers couldn't promise: predictable delivery schedules. Backed by long-term contracts with fixed pricing and zero political complications, the exodus from American suppliers has been fast and brutal. Over $23 billion in long-term energy contracts have shifted from American facilities to Canadian. One's in just 18 months. Major Japanese industrial giant companies are now signing exclusive agreements with Canadian energy companies that stretch through 2035. But energy was just the entry point, Japan's car revolution. The transition to electric cars that will define. The next decade is now being powered by Canadian materials instead of American ones: lithium from Quebec mines, cobalt from Ontario operations. Rare earth elements processed in Canadian facilities are flowing across the Pacific to Japanese factories. The technology transfer has followed the materials. Japanese engineers are now working permanently in Canadian facilities, sharing advanced manufacturing techniques and establishing joint research programs. Innovation that once flowed naturally between Tokyo and California is now concentrated in the Toronto-Vancouver corridor. Japanese car giants like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan are establishing research and development centers in Canadian provinces. They're funding expansion of Canadian mining operations, training Canadian workers in advanced manufacturing techniques, and building integrated supply chains that will operate independently of American suppliers for decades. The strategic implications extend beyond energy markets. Japanese companies are now investing in Canadian renewable energy projects, funding wind and solar facilities across Canadian provinces. What started as emergency sourcing has become permanent partnership, with Japanese firms committing billions to Canadian infrastructure development. Energy workers across Texas and Louisiana are watching their facilities operate at reduced capacity as Japanese contracts disappear. Mining communities in Wyoming and Montana are seeing operations scaled back. The ripple effects are spreading through American supply chains that once seemed unshakable. A senior executive at Japan's largest utility company, speaking anonymously, captured the new reality. We cannot base our industrial future on suppliers who view energy as a political tool rather than an economic necessity. Canada treats energy as business. The strategic implications extend far beyond energy markets. When the world's third-largest economy chooses Canadian partners over American ones, it signals a fundamental shift in global confidence. But this energy revolution is small compared to what's happening with Europe's industrial powerhouse. Number 5. Germany, the precision engineering exodus. Imagine the economic powerhouse that rebuilt Europe choosing to abandon its oldest ally for a competitor nobody saw coming. That's the story unfolding in Germany, and it represents perhaps the most shocking betrayal in modern trade history. Germany built its post-war economic miracle on American partnership. Marshall Plan aid, technology transfer, and integrated supply chains created the foundation for German industrial dominance, from BMW assembly lines to chemical plants along the Rhine. German precision engineering was powered by American innovation and materials. That 75-year partnership is collapsing with stunning speed. The car sector tells the story in stock numbers. German car manufacturers have redirected 43% of their North American component sourcing from American suppliers to Canadian ones over the past 2 years. We're talking about advanced battery materials, precision alloys, and specialized chemicals. Essential for electric vehicle production. What triggered this industrial exodus? American suppliers became victims of their own political system, regulatory uncertainty, trade policy shifts, and supply chain disruptions made it impossible for German engineers to plan production schedules or guarantee delivery commitments to customers worldwide. Canadian suppliers offered something German. Precision manufacturing demanded predictability, fixed price contracts, guaranteed delivery windows, and stable regulatory frameworks that allowed German.